So hello and welcome to the sixth webinar in our series, and welcome back if you've joined us before. Today we're talking about delivering community-led housing yourselves, and we've got some really great guest speakers to talk us through it today. As usual, a bit of boring housekeeping from me first before introductions. So just to let you know, attendees, you don't have audio or video on, and that's the default for the duration of the webinar. But there will be an opportunity to come onto the screen later if you would like to, and I'll explain how to do that now. So you should see some buttons probably along the bottom of your screen, and these enable you to participate in a couple of ways. So you can ask a question using the Q&A box, or you can hit the raise a hand button, and that alerts me as the host that you would like to join with your audio and video to ask a question in person. But what we'll do is we'll have our presentations from guest speakers first. So if you do raise a hand during this time, I won't come to you until the second half of the webinar, which is dedicated to questions. There is another chat box, that's probably on the right-hand side of your screen, where you can put general comments, links, resources, etc. that other participants may find helpful. So I'll be putting up some links to the projects of our guest speakers today. So you can follow up, but do make sure if you specifically have a question that you want answering, that it goes into the Q&A box at the bottom, because sometimes I miss them if they're on the chat box on the side. The webinar is being recorded, and I will be uploading that onto our Vimeo channel hopefully tomorrow. You can ask a question anonymously in the Q&A box if you don't want to be identified. And finally, I've got a poll that I'll launch in a minute, and that just helps us find out roughly where people are joining us from, if they're from within the Wessex area or from outside. It's just interesting for us to know. Great, so housekeeping done, on to introductions. My name is Hannah, I'm facilitating today, and I work with Colin McDonald, who's also here, on the Wessex Community Housing Hub. And the Hub provides support and guidance for people in the Wessex area on their community housing journey. And we're also joined today, I'm thrilled to say, by two great guest speakers who will be sharing their experiences of this stage of community-led housing. So first we'll be hearing from Hugo Davies, and he's a self-builder at Broadhempston CLT in Devon. Then I've got a short video to play from a previous webinar that we did. It's a little taster to see if you're interested in watching the rest, which is, we did that with Anna Hope. She's from the Ashley Vale Self-Build project in Bristol. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Hazel Tilley, who's a founder member and board member of the Granby 4 Streets CLT project. And most importantly, is a member of the community and a neighbour, as is Hugo. So it's really great because we've got people with some really direct personal experience today. So like I said, we'll have those presentations for half an hour, and then we can move on to questions. And as well as these guys, we've got Colin as the Hub's community housing advisor to be on hand to help answer questions too. And then once we've finished, I'll be sending out a follow-up email of any resources that we've discussed. Okie dokie, that's enough from me. If you are happy, Hugo, it would be great to hand over to you. I'll just, are you all right to unmute yourself? Great.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. So I'm Hugo Davies. I'm a member of Broadhempston Community Land Trust. It's a village in South Devon. We developed it's a rural housing project for affordable homes. I'll just give you a little introduction. There's six homes made of detached homes made of timber frame and straw bale insulation, so they're really well insulated. They have priority allocation to local people to sort of support families living in the village. And the council, Teambridge Council, was or still is really keen to encourage self-build in the area. It was a greenfield site. Farmer sold the land to us at a reduced rate than a normal developer would get it. It was what they call an exception site. So you can only build with certain exceptions. It has to be affordable and similar things like that. It started with a company similar to Wessex, really, who were trying to be a facilitator for groups in villages or communities. They advertised in the village for anyone wanting to build their own home that would be affordable and ecological. And they helped us find the land, get planning permission, and they worked with the architect initially to develop a design. So we adopted a design really. So that was kind of done for us. And then we did pay for that, but it was work that was done before we came along. Then during the construction phase, we worked alone, as in without the facilitator, but working with architects and other consultants, as you would, as a contractor would. The Community Land Trust, they acted as the main contractor. So the self-builders were essentially sort of free labour. And then we employed main subcontractors like groundworks contractors, timber frame company, and yeah, those brought those in where there was skilled work involved. So I'm going to, Colin helpfully gave me some prompts of things that might be good to explain. So I think it'd be simplest if I go through those. So the first one was, how do we decide what was self-build and what was contractor or tradespeople? And well, the aim of self-build, as you can guess, is to save, well, the essential aim is to save money, especially when it comes to affordable housing, to keep the cost of the whole project low. So the self-builders, we all did as much as we could, but where skilled work was required, or yeah, skilled work such as structural elements, drainage, foundations, timber frame, and some trades like a screed floor, electrics, plastering. We employed people to do that. The self-builders, we fitted out the timber frame. So I'll show you some photos in a minute to explain it all. But yeah, we basically had a skeleton of a frame, and then we covered all the roofing, so all the battening, felting, slating on the walls, the insulation, the battens, the cladding, and then inside dry lining, plasterboard, which takes a lot of time to do all that. And there are 6 houses and only well, 6 families, couples. Everyone's still working in their jobs, so most of the work gets done at the weekends or any spare time in the week. So the next one was how to identify, engage with, and manage those subcontractors. So how did we bring the main contractors on board? Well, with the help of an architect who ideally has experience or knows the network in the local area, you can use them to help you choose contractors that might be suitable, and then to engage with them. It's best to engage with the contractors as early as possible in the design stage, so that if you work with a contractor early, they can begin to understand your project, and it's if you offer them in return a position on the tender list, they are more inclined to help you, and then hopefully they get the job. That way, when it comes to construction, they understand the project, and there's much less chance of them saying this is too expensive, this is too difficult, because they would have ironed out all of those problems at the beginning. So through your architect, yeah, you can create a conversation with contractors, and then when it comes to interviewing, you can interview them with CLT members present, and be confident that they understand the project and how the site will be managed with self-builders there. And what is important when it comes to management is having a clear contract that covers the exact work they're going to do, and a sort of plan of when and how they're going to do it, and a clear payment structure, and any sort of plan of resolving any problems like payment dispute or uncertainties, or does it get built, do we pay you when it's built or when it's delivered? Because the big difference between being asked to get paid when there's just a pile of timber frame on the floor compared to when there's a finished timber frame built. Also, which is really good, is if you can get them to do what's called open book, which is where all their costs are open for everyone to see, even the profit margin, because that way everyone's working openly and there's nothing to hide, which is quite, it's not that common, but a lot of people do it because it makes the whole project run a lot more smoothly. So next one, working alongside the self-builders and overall site management. So our site was quite big. There's enough space for contractors to work on one house and self-builders to work on another, and quite safely. There was safety was just as important as any construction site. We'd have all the standard protective clothing, safety inductions, fire plans, stuff like that. And we did, the self-builders, we did help with some contractors, particularly the groundworks. So sort of donkey work of lugging blocks around when we're laying the concrete beam and block floor. We didn't have it in writing that we'd get a discount by doing that. So we didn't actually see any discount when it came to the bill for doing that. But so next time, if you do help out the contractors, make sure you get it firmed up if you're getting any money off. Then how did self-builders go from willing volunteers to competent construction? Well, I don't know if we ever got that competent, but we did have a professional builder work with us during the week, and he would show us how to construct each element, and then we'd copy that and repeat it. So by the time we got to the last house, we kind of knew what we were doing, probably ready to actually do a proper house. But yeah, so having a professional builder with you is, I'd say, essential, because otherwise, there was an initial plan to for us years ago. It was discussed that we go to a college, learn how to build, then come to site. I don't really think that would have worked, because it's much better to learn on the job, really. Some initial trials, definitely, but with such limited time for the self-builders, it's quite hard to fit all that in. Who managed materials or plant on the site at the right time? So one of the self-builders was employed by the Community Land Trust as a site manager, and he generally managed the contractors when they're coming and what they're doing, which is a lot of work, and I wouldn't recommend burdening a self-builder with that job if you're ever to do it. I think it's much better to leave it to have someone employed separately to do that job, because it's a whole job on its own, and building your house is enough as it is. I stopped work for a year to do the build, and I worked with the site manager, but I mostly looked after materials and quantifying and ordering, and I mean, as well as self-building, but but yeah, there's a lot of work from just to translate some architect's drawings into a palette of insulation, or working out how much insulation you need in the roof. It's and then going through the different types of insulation that the different suppliers provide. And so it's a time-consuming task. And then on the whole, the group of self-builders worked as a team. If anyone could do a task, everyone pulled their weight. It was a very good team spirit. We were quite a small group, so I think that helped. There wasn't too many strong opinions, or everyone was just quite focused on getting the houses built. It wasn't we weren't a group particularly passionate about environment or one thing or the other. Our main aim was to get the houses built and be glad to have this opportunity, really. So next, working around absentees. Well, if someone couldn't make a day, or for whatever reason, we just had to carry on, pull together. A friend could step in. They do a safety induction, and we just be very grateful of their help. We live in quite a small village, and there's a family network of trades and companies, or construction work companies. So we did pull on quite a few favors on borrowing plant equipment, drivers, plumbing, extra labor, that kind of stuff. So it was quite reliant on that, which is completely, you can't plan for that, or if you it wasn't such a slick operation that we didn't need any of that. Liaison with various professionals, such as architect, clerk of works, building regs inspector. Well, the site manager and myself did most of that. There were some directors on the Community Land Trust board who were involved in the I think fortnightly site meetings. We'd held site meetings with the architect, with the building control inspector, and to discuss progress. We didn't have a clerk of works. That's someone who checks that's what is being built is as it's shown on the drawings, which probably would have been good. That would have added cost. I basically did that. I'm also an architect, so I was pretty familiar with interpreting the drawings. But as a novice self-builder who's never seen construction drawings before, it's a whole new language, and it's hard to understand what it all means. So having your architect draw them in a very clear way helps, even with 3D models or real descriptions, models. And probably most importantly, the last one, with hindsight, what would you have done differently? Well, in general, try to make it as less stressful and tiring for self-builders and enjoyable, and everyone, and perhaps even make it enjoyable. No, it is enjoyable, but it is tiring and stressful. So, and then because we were a bit of a guinea pig project, there was a lot of learning, and there was quite a lot of rush. It was done, lots of it was done quite in a rush, because there was the funding for the project suddenly became available, and there was a short window to take the funding, so we had to take it, and the project wasn't as well planned and costed as it might have been. So things that could have been done to make it easier were, I'd say, a simple design. Keep the design as simple as you can, and you still achieve really great spaces. But construction-wise, avoid awkward corners, joints, such as dormer windows and angular sunrooms and things, because they're complicated to build. They add a lot of time making them, and more chance for mistakes because they're fiddly. And there's a bigger range of materials you've got to use, and you know, you've got to order those, you've got to work out what's for what. And then yeah, that slows down the time, and time kind of costs because you're paying on an interest rate because you're borrowing the money. So it can make it more expensive. So, and that makes it a bit more stressful, the whole, you know, things take longer. Whereas if it's quicker, the morale is higher, people are enjoying it more, and it's a lovely experience. And it should be a great experience. We're all building our own homes. It's a wonderful thing to do. And the simpler it is, there's a better chance of a constant standard of quality, you know, because everything is a simple thing to do. And then less dependent on trade stepping in to help. Ours was straw bale, which is really good fun. Straw bale is great, but the lime plaster to go on it, that we did need a trade to do that, and it was a bit expensive. It's just one example. Just last few things.
Cool.
How much time have I gone over?
Maybe another minute or so. Is that
okay.
Right? Great.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cost analysis of the whole project before planning. So that when you go into planning, you know that it's roughly on budget. Appoint someone to oversee contracts with the main, say, timber frame contractor, and then they're being managed off your back, but you know it's been done right. Independent site manager, talked about that. Strategy for contingency for employing trades. Yeah, allow in your budget a contingency for employing trades if you need to. Shall I just quickly run? I've got about 8 photos. Shall I just put some?
Oh, cool. Well, actually, shall we? I tell you what. If I go onto my little video now, shall we pop questions up while pictures up while people are asking questions later? Maybe.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Absolutely.
That way.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Nice. It's so hard to condense down, but thank you, Hugo. That was really helpful. Some really useful insights. And actually, now I've got a video which is quite a good segue in a way, going between what Hugo and the folks at Broadhemston CRT have done, which is a complete new build, you know, blank slate going in. And this video, to give you a little bit of context, is from Anna Hope. So she works with the Ashley Vale Action Group to do some self-build houses in Bristol. But they also had on site, excuse me, they also had on site a sort of a derelict kind of office building, I think it was. She might explain more in the video. That they sort of went through some various iterations of what to do with it, and you know, whether it should be knocked down completely or whether they develop it for something that's of shared use for the community that lives there. So I will just do a quick share screen of that one now. And then hopefully it's a little taste for you to go and watch the rest of that webinar if you're interested, if your interest has been piqued. Great. You can see our faces multiple times. Don't be put off. It's a bit weird.
And then the third phase of the project was the old office building, which we'd initially planned to renovate to provide low-cost workspace and community venue. We went through about 2 or 3 different business plans for that, none of which actually stacked up, because the cost of renovating the building was so much that we couldn't, and then plus all the kind of, you'd have to put a lift in, you'd have to put fire escapes and all the stuff you need for a public building, which meant that we couldn't then have afforded to rent those workspaces affordably. So we took a different tack. We got a few households interested who were up for helping create another self-finish housing project. if you look on the bottom left picture, an extra story went on top, timber glulam beams. So we added extra volume to the building. The top 3 floors are divided into 6 apartments, and the ground floor is retained for community use. So there are 3 work units in there and a community venue, which is very well used. And then each apartment owner then got a blank space in which to then build whatever they wanted. So the picture on the right there, you can see someone's got this whole kind of big volume, which they've then gone and divided up into individual rooms according to their needs. So it went, so spot the difference, this one is from there to there. And that's great, because any developer would have come in and just knocked that building down, but we really wanted to keep the embodied energy and improve on it. So
brief little snippet, but yeah, it feels like a nice segue, because obviously there's multiple ways to self-build, and when we talk about self-build, there's obviously doing it from scratch, but also we've got the alternating perspective from Hazel, who's joining us from Liverpool from the Granby 4 Streets project, which is really exciting, because I believe, Hazel, you bought a whole row of houses. Could you elaborate? Done a little ask to unmute.
Sorry, yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, there
Hi.
we go. No, we didn't buy a whole row of houses. Right. We bought initially 10 houses for £1 in a not quite derelict street. It was actually in the street in which I was living. But we started a long time before we formed the Community Land Trust, because initially we formed a residents association, and that was to help stop the demolition. Toxteth, Granby Street, and where the Granby 4 Streets are, is quite a particular area of Liverpool with a particular history, and the history of Toxteth can be looked up by lots of people, and it's an interesting thing to see. But it's a really good example of what institutionalized racism does to communities, and how communities change over generations, because these are houses that were built between the 1880s and late 1890s, and the community that lived there has clearly changed over the years. But because we're quite near to the docks, then a lot of the work fed the docks. And also, if you're near to docks, if you're near to a port, then you get a multi-racial community. I mean, we have the oldest Chinatown in Europe, near to the docks. And what happened to Toxteth is well documented over the years. And I still believe that the plan to clear Granby Street was a punishment for the uprisings of 1981. And we know that institutionalized racism continues, but what we set out to do was to save a place and to save a community. We didn't set out to be housing people, but over 28 years, things have changed. So we had the Residents Association, and they formed a gardening group. And the gardening group made a world of difference, because what we wanted was for people not to come out into a street where they'd been fly tipping. That was basically sad and filthy. You open your front door and it was sad and it was dirty. And as the council emptied people out, housing associations decided they weren't going to do repairs. There was some demolition, some new build, people were moved out, so it became an almost empty street. I think at one point, a street of 65 houses, 68 houses, had 7 of us living in houses, and we're all spread out. And there's nothing so sad as living in a street with very few lights popping through the windows. So there were difficult times, and then there was times of opportunity, and we were supported. So you say about working alone, and you never work alone. Nobody works alone. We need each other. And I wish I'd met Hugo 12 years ago when we first started looking at the possibility of doing houses, because basically the Pathways, the Housing Market Renewal Initiative was stopped. And that was what gave us an opportunity, because that took away the opportunities for consultants, for construction companies to make profits. and the council, Liverpool City Council, was still intent on demolition. And we said, look, we think we can renovate these houses at a cost that is worthwhile keeping them. And indeed we did. The cost we set at renovating the houses was £85,000 a house. And we did renovate them for that. But what we forgot was that there are all sorts of other fees that have to be paid. And a lot of them ended up being legal fees. Because what we were absolutely sure of is that whatever happened to those houses, it still needed to remain within social rents or a cheap sale, because they had to be accessible. So even for the sale of our houses, we used the council the council list for those in need, and we just added a proviso about people having a connection to Granby, you know, either via work or family or, you know, whatever. But we always topped, you know, on top of our list was somebody in need. And if you were really in need, and it didn't matter what connection you had, your connection wasn't you needed somewhere to live, and that's connection enough for us. But so what we did was really quite small, but the impact we've had, I think, has been quite massive, because it's forced the council to have a look at the street again, and they then gave a lot of the houses back to housing associations and said for them to renovate. So that's how a whole street came back to life. And it's Granby 4 streets. One street is still derelict, and there's some discussion over that and the developers who want what they want to do to it. But the other 3 streets have come back to life because they're lived in. Almost every house is renovated. But we have only renovated, we've renovated 7 houses for rent, 5 houses for sale, and 2 houses that formed a community winter garden, because they were in such appalling condition that you might as well recognise that we couldn't renovate those. And I do reiterate what Hugo said. I can't tell you how important an architect is. People think that they can do things without an architect, that a builder, you know, will have a look and do it. They won't do what an architect can do. Nobody can do what an architect can do. And they're just, in my view, they belong in the top echelons of art. A good architect is worth their weight in gold. Not the ones, you don't want an architect that produces a plan that can be put up anywhere. You know, like you see, there's certain supermarkets that you will recognise from 2 miles away because of the way they're built. You know, it seems to me that day services for people seem to follow a certain model in the 70s, and you can pick them out. But a good architect will look at what is there and how best to use it. And they want to know, they want to be informed by your ideas. And I just think if you've got a good architect, you've got a good working partnership. And we were really, really lucky to be introduced to Assemble a long time, at least 2 years before we started any renovation, before we'd actually got the houses. The machinations, if you're working with a local council, which most of us have to do, some are better than others, but they're it's not easy. It's just not easy. And Liverpool City Council apparently has a reputation for not being easy. And in fact, they've been so slow that the implications for us are really quite horrendous, and have been horrendous, and have costed money. So nonetheless, what we did was really important. What we continue to do is really important, because it's about a place, and Hugo, where his houses are being built sounds idyllic. Where we're building is in a city, you know, terraced houses. And we will be doing some new builds. So we're on a learning curve for new builds, because there's derelict spaces and not everything can be turned into a garden. We're really, really keen on using spaces, whatever little space there is, put a plant in it, because that makes a difference to lives. Because it's not just where people live, it's how they live, and what you see when you come out of your door. And I've never looked for equality, but I absolutely look for equity. And for those who have not to, or don't have as much, you know, the small person needs 2 boxes. The medium-sized person only needs one, and the tall person doesn't need any. And that's equity. It's not the same for everybody. It's different, and it's recognizing that difference. And I think that that Granby 4th Street CLT is really good at doing that. And I think the houses, what we've done with our houses, are beautiful, and they were beautiful enough to be recognised as pieces of art. You know, what was put into them and built by the community. But we're not as hands-on as Hugo, because that's not how we started. We're hands-on in a board, and the board being made up of mostly the people who live there. And that's great, but it's also not great, because where we started off with this being really isolated, being the place where nobody wants to go, we were the absolute no-go place of Liverpool, and house prices fell so low that at one point I think we were offered about 4,800 for our houses, and told we were lucky to be offered that much. And now the houses are worth around about 100,000 a piece. So, but it's not, we've never, we're really garbage at money, because we don't look at money in the way money people do. And if we'd had somebody who's good at money on the board, then I think that would have made a huge difference. We started with somebody from social housing, from a social housing association on the board, and that made a massive difference to us. So to add to, because Hugo's given us tons of information, and even though we do different things, there's some core information there that is just spot on. You know, the contract stuff, the clear contract, the time, you know, the payment structure, the time scales, and to have somebody to manage that, to project manage it, it's really important. And your choice of project manager is important. But if you're working from a board and you're trying to work where you're including the views of the people who live in the area, which sometimes don't meet with what the board feels, but that's the whole thing, is, you know, you need to be challenged. You need to know that your idea isn't necessarily the right idea, even if it's a good idea. You know, there are other ideas that, and you need to learn to compromise. But the makeup of the board is critical. You need people on a board who actually know what they're doing. And the issue is we never did. We're beginning to know what we're doing, but it's taken a long time, and the structure of the board has changed. But I think if you can start, because it's all very well to have a load of keen people who live in the area, but with the greatest respect in the world, none of us were used to dealing with more than about 50, 60 pounds at a time. And suddenly you're dealing with £500,000. And it's just, I would say that our biggest mistakes have been made financially. Our biggest worries have been finance. We've never been short of ideas, and we've never been short of wanting to do the right thing and to plough any profit back into what we do, which we absolutely have. And our rented houses are self-sustaining. But I would say to people, look at your money before you know, have your idea, because some of the ideas we had were incredibly grand, and we've learned to cut our cloth and to actually say, this is a realistic cost. This is what will work for the community. So on top of everything that Hugo said, I would say really look at how you're managing your money, make a future forecast, produce a good business plan, because that is where you'll get your loans from and your grants from, and it'll also tell you how you're going to service your loans going into the future. I don't know what else you'd like to know. Start small. I think that's another thing that we've learned, because I think maybe we grew too ambitious in too short a time, and things don't work at the speed that you think they're going to work. You know, if you think a building's going to be done in 6 months, double it. Right. If you think you're going to get a fund in 3 months, double it. Sometimes treble it. If you think you're going to get an answer from a council in a month, I would say you're probably looking at 18 months, and that is the reality of the situation. So your timescales have to be really flexible, and you really have to work hard to try and get the right things to happen at the right time. Because one of the things that we're really used to doing now is sending apologies to our funders to say that this hasn't happened yet, and these are the reasons why. Can you please give us a bit more time? Because quite often when you raise funds, it's for a very specific reason, and that's what it must be spent on. and normally it has to be spent within a certain time scale. So we're not at the luxury where we're raising money or very much money where we can do with it what we want, because we're still servicing future build. So yeah, so my addition to everything that Hugo said is try and look at your board and the board makeup and make sure that you've got a financial person on there as well as a housing person. And if you can get an architect on there, you're laughing.
Great. That's
Right.
a good, yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Hazel.
Thank you.
That's a really good, yeah, that's such great insights from you. Thank you so much. It's also a really good segue into the last two webinars we've got that are coming up, one of which is about good governance and good democracy. And hopefully we'll have some really good insights into, yeah, like, you know, ways to build boards. Obviously everywhere is different, but yeah, there's some really good insights to be had into the makeup of your board and how you can do that. Great. So I've already got some questions in the Q&A box, which is really brilliant. So I'll see. I'll get us started on that. But just wanted to make sure, Hugo, feel free now if you want to do a little screen share. I've just enabled you to be able to share a screen. If you want to put some photos up whenever, go for it. But I will go to some of the first questions. So I had a question from Chris that probably applies to everyone, although Hugo, you mentioned it. So regarding open book, Chris says he's heard it mentioned before, but would like to find some good and reliable resources about it, even sample documents. So Hugo, do you have any sort of advice on how you went about the open book process and asking for it? Just need to unmute you. Hang on a sec.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I can find some advice for you if you like. I'll have a look. And with something we're quite familiar with at work. So I know my boss will certainly have something. So I'll dig something up. Do you mean some sort of reference guide or something? Or
it looks like, yeah, probably like a resource and maybe the sample documents or something to look at. That would be really helpful. If you've got that, I can stick it in an email.
Yeah, shall I email it to you?
That'd be really useful. Yeah, and then Colin, I don't know, is that something you've come across?
I was going to say the principle, yeah, which I think Hugo described, and clearly the point is that you've got a very trusting relationship between both parties in that, and I've heard of it used where in other projects where cost savings are shared, between the parties, which might have been helpful to Hugo in terms of the money they saved by lugging about everyone's heavy components. But I think, as you say, if you can include something in the follow-up email, I think that would cover it. And yeah,
sure,
that's
I'll make a note of it.
That's a good idea. Yeah, great. Okay, brilliant. So have a look at our next questions. So Diana's asked, this one's for you as well, Hugo. How did you raise initial funding to purchase the land? Do you know, was that sort of pre you joining the project?
To purchase the land, I mean, we applied to really social investment bank. I mean, it's not a high street bank. They're called Resonance. They fund projects that are, have social benefit basically, and they supported the scheme. So
Nice.
yeah, they I guess being socially focused, they're more likely to consider schemes like ours than a more conventional bank would, because there's probably more risk for ours than a normal bank. So yeah, we used a company called Resonance.
And so something that one of our previous webinars, so Diana, if you didn't go to that one, it's on our Vimeo, which I'll send you a link to. We covered a finance, we did a finance webinar, which might have some interesting things for you, some insights as well. So I have a question for myself as well, which is that, so I'm noticing from a novice point of view, community-led housing is new to me as of about a year ago. With purchase and refurbishment, which is what you've been doing, Hazel, in Liverpool, I wonder, I've heard that house prices in the south and the southwest are obviously very different, and I don't know of any, maybe one scheme, correct me if I'm wrong, in the southwest that is sort of using purchase and refurbishment. Colin, do you think we have any potential for more of it, or do you think it's prohibitive because of?
Well, I think you're quite right, Hannah, that a lot depends on what the relative capital values are. And I think the situation that Hazel and her colleagues were facing was quite different from some of the situations that we face in some of the market towns in the southwest, where it might be that you're in competition with other people who are, buy-to-let investor, private landlords, or some such, and it might be that you're in competition with the sort of what I want to call homesteaders, the individuals who are purchasing their first property and intending to do it up themselves, and sort of do it yourself renovation type. So I think it does depend on the circumstances, but there are some cases, and I know that Tim, who's probably in the audience at the moment, has been working with a group in Torbay on that very subject. So there are opportunities in the southwest, but as you say, the economics are different according to your particular location, and you've also, I think it also depends on quite how far properties have deteriorated before somebody is in a position to renovate them, which is another question again, but certainly not something we'd rule out. I'm very much struck by our tradition in the Wessex area is looking at new build schemes, and our tradition in the Wessex area is looking at community land trusts. But there's no reason why other community-led groups couldn't do refurbishment or repurposing of an existing building, and it doesn't have to be a community land trust. It could be a cooperative. It could be a group. So the opportunities are many.
Yeah. As ever, yeah, we love to remind everyone that there are so many different models and different ways of delivering community-led housing. I've got a question to Hugo. So you made a recommendation to keep your design simple, but do you not think an element of complicated design is needed to avoid building somewhere, dare I say, ugly? What do you think to that?
Well, I guess that's the design challenge, to build it, to have a simple design that is still striking and still has wonderful spaces inside. It doesn't have to be complicated to be really great, or vice versa. So that's what you pay an architect to try and work to do, and added in the mix, you're building it by novice builders. So the challenge is to design a great space, looks beautiful, but functions well and is a wonderful place to live in. But yeah, completely, you don't want to make it ugly. But there's plenty. I'm sure there's plenty of simple design that's still striking and wonderful place to live. That's just the challenge of design, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Hazel, so similar question to you. Did you find, kind of working with the community as you were going along with the process, that you took a lot of community consultation on design and how people wanted things to look? Obviously the garden is incredible, like a really resourceful use of space.
from the start, we've tried to involve the community, and it's very hard. Community consultation is again a difficult thing, because some people will have loud voices and will always come forward, and some people will think that their opinions aren't important. So it's how do you get as many people as possible to join in and to have their voice. So we found that you have to use a variety of ways, that it's not good enough to hold a meeting. That doesn't do it. But we started our community market, which that runs once a month, or it did do until COVID. And that was so well attended that it's a good place to put up a stall and, you know, put some nice pictures up and, you know, say today we're asking about. So I think it's about making things small as well, because there's no point in just saying we've got this building, what do you want to do with it? It's way too big a question, you know. So we have to have some idea of what the fund, what, you know, where we can get funding and what we can use the building for. Because as I said when we started, we didn't start with houses, but renovation of the houses became an urgency. Some of the houses had stood empty, you know, for 20-25 years, and Liverpool City Council stripped the roof off, stripped the lead off all the roofs, because they felt that otherwise it would get stolen. And of course the damage that does to the houses is just unbelievable. And so there really was a whole thing about, you know, we can't do the houses up. It's going to be better if everybody's out and we can sell it as land planned for building, you know, for the council. And so there really was, you know, neglect to lead to gentle destruction, and the fact that we would move out eventually because it became impossible to live there. And people can't move out if they don't have an alternative. And some people just would refuse to move out. Some people were offered alternatives in rented accommodation, but actually didn't want to leave the area, you know, and didn't want to leave that specific street. But for those who bought their houses, you know, there was no way that you could start again. And so what we did wasn't just done out of altruism, it was done out of necessity. But we wanted to do it in the best way possible, and we didn't necessarily want to do it ourselves, but we ended up doing it ourselves. You know, but back to community consultation, it's hard. I find food helps if you're providing a meal with a meeting, and also if you're providing it at tea time, because time is really important. You know, if you leave it till 5 or 6 o'clock, which you think is a sensible time for an evening meeting, it's not, because mums have picked up the kids, are in the process of feeding them and bathing them and doing the mum things, and they don't want to come out again. So if you provide a meal at tea time, they bring the kids. So you also have to provide a creche. And it's a lot. I think that I'm practical, and sort of look at those little details, and that's really my part. I think that's what I add to the board, is that, you know, you need to do those things. People need to be comfortable. And I also think that sharing food is a great way of breaking ice. You know, once you sat and had a meal with somebody, you know by the time the meal's finished whether you want to spend more time in their company or whether you couldn't stand to be with them again. So, but yeah. I think food is great, and I think that if you start with a meal, so a lot of people run a meeting first and finish with a meal. Start with the meal and make sure that everybody's full and the kids have run around, and then they can be, you know, gathered away to be kept quiet somewhere else, and, you know, and then you can have a meeting because people are satisfied. And they're more likely to, I think, to be positive. I'm always more optimistic with a full belly than when I'm hungry.
Some good insights, definitely. And presumably, yeah, Hugo, you probably agree sort of during a build process that well-fed means happier people working on projects. And I had a question from Rebecca saying, moving on to sort of like practical parts of the build. So Rebecca's asked, how long does the straw last in the walls? And were there any insurance issues with building your house of straw?
Actually, straw is becoming more conventional. It's got its own part in the building regs. And straw will last as long as you like, as long as it's looked after right. It's just got to be dry, no moisture getting into it, and it's actually can be more fireproof than a more conventional build because there's no air gaps, so dense, and the lime plaster is just like trapping it all in. So yeah, as long as it's built right, it will last as long as you like. It won't get blown down. It's all right.
Yeah, we remember warnings from old tales.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Great. Okay, let's just check if we've got any more. No one's raised a hand. That's good. I'll make sure I'm not ignoring anyone. Oh, great. That's a lovely picture as well. That's a big, that's the, what do you call those in front? Do you call it a greenhouse? Would you, or it's just kind of like a little atrium more? Oh, sorry, I've muted you again. Oh.
Yeah, it's like a sun space. The hot air rises into the top bedrooms, but yeah, it's a lovely space to be in.
Yes.
I'm not you know, I'm not advocating that you should, going back to that guy's point, that you should create dull houses, not at all. And these are wonderful spaces to be in, but when balanced up, I think just having to balance up the novice build, the time restraint, the cost to keep them affordable. There's things that have to be weighed up when designing. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, great. Well, so I suppose a question to end on, just to maybe contrast with what we were talking about in our webinar last week, which was working, joining up with a housing association, a registered provider to deliver housing. Obviously, you've both got very different stories, and I know Hazel particularly, it's the community housing journey wasn't obviously a community housing journey at the beginning, and it stretched over a long period of time, but were there sort of conscious decisions that you wanted to manage the projects on your own rather than teaming up with a housing association? Because one of the things we talked about last week was just that there are compromises to be made when you are working with a HA that you might not have to make, but then they sort of would do some heavy lifting for you, which you have to do yourself. So I suppose maybe Hazel first and then Hugo. Have you got any insights on you know, if you made a conscious decision not to work with a HA, or that's kind of just how it happened? I'll just asked you to unmute Hazel first.
Yeah.
There we go.
Like most of the things that the CLT has done, it's been part planned and mostly organic, you know, that this bit has led to that bit, and this decision has meant that this decision has to be made. But the housing associations weren't actually interested at when we started to have a look at what we could do. And we'd spoken to the council about 20, you know, really right at the beginning of them wanting to empty out the area and demolish, because they said the houses were no good. You know, people don't want to live in terraced houses, blah, 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 blah. And there was loads of issues about why people didn't want to live there and why people actually do like terraces, and there were, you know, and the residual heat, the closeness to families, the straightness of the streets. If you live in an inner city area, you're especially in an area of poverty, then you're acutely aware of crime and you're acutely aware of distress. So if you've got a neighborhood that's a long straight street that you can see all the way down, that your doors, when I open my door, I can stand a foot away from my neighbor when she opens her door. We don't, because they're social distancing, but in the normality of things you do. And it seems to me that a lot of states are built on purpose to make sure that when you open your door, you don't see anybody. And that to me is just crazy. But also we'd been traumatized by what had happened in the area, by how the houses, as soon as they were empty, the wrecking crew was sent in to make sure that they were wrecked, that everything that could possibly be smashed up and taken out of the houses was done. I mean, I'm old school, I'm 66 nearly. I'm a fan of squatters' rights, although they don't seem to have too many these days, but they did when I was younger. And so I was always hoping that we'd get squatters in before the demolition crew came, but they came so fast and we never did. And I think people are more afraid of squatting now than they used to be. Yeah, it's like hitchhiking, people are more wary. And I don't think it's any more dangerous squatting now than it used to be. But, you know, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
So,
Yeah, cool. And then similar question to you, Hugo. In terms of housing association relationships, you know, did Broadhemston CLT think about that, and then sort of prefer to do the more self-build route?
No, it wasn't something we considered or looked into really. I mean, at the beginning we were sort of being like led. We were being guided as to what to do, and we were just, you know, presented with this opportunity, kick-started by that small company who wanted to make a business out of doing this, facilitating this. So we were just sort of following along, and then just glad to be a part of it. So we weren't really aware of that. So yeah, given the time, and maybe given time again, you know, it'd be good to just look at what options there are of how to deliver housing. But no, I think from the start, this project was all about a community-led self-build. So, you know, it was really just the local people doing it themselves. That was the aim of the project. So no, we didn't look into housing associations.
Yeah, and that's really great to hear, because I think yeah, as we like to emphasize a lot, there's so many different shapes and sizes that community-led housing can come in, and you know, in danger of it becoming a bit prescriptive, that CLTs partner with housing associations, and while that can work so well for some people, for other communities it doesn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really nice to hear a broad spread. Cool. All right, well, I think we're just over 3 o'clock, so I wanted to just check in with Colin and see if there's anything else that you wanted to add, Colin. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap there.
I think we've been very lucky, or maybe I should say blessed today, with having two speakers, quite inspirational in quite different ways, but quite inspirational, quite completely different projects, completely different from each other, and completely different from the sort of project that we often talk about. And I was struck by one of the things that Hazel said earlier, which was something like, I don't know, I can't remember it verbatim, Hazel, but you said something like your board didn't really know what they were doing. And I thought that wasn't fair, really, because whatever you thought about whether you knew what you were doing at the time, look at what you've done. And you know, the proof of the pudding's in the eating, as they say. And you know, what you've achieved has been inspiration to others as well. So in all of these cases, I just say, as Hannah was just repeating, you know, there's whatever anyone is trying to do in their community-led scheme, there will be compromises to be made, and really it's applying your own set of values and your own common sense as to which compromises you want to make, whether they're financial or physical, or to do with the design, or do with the allocations process, or just that simple question of whether you work with a housing association partner or take on the whole project yourself. Those are all compromises to be made, and I should repeat the thing that we've forgotten to say each time, which is, if you're watching from outside our area, you know, there will be a local community-led housing hub in your area to help you. So if you want help or advice, come to your local hub, and I or my counterparts in other parts of the country will do what we can. But none of us are substitute for talking to people like our guest speakers today who've actually done it themselves. I hope everyone's found that quite useful, inspirational.
Yeah, I definitely have. It's been a joy. Well, dare I say it, I could carry on, but I best draw it to a close. So again, Hugo and Hazel, thank you so very much. Really appreciate your time. It's been an absolute pleasure learning about your projects, your journeys, and I know folks will have learned a lot to take away from that. Great. All right, folks, have a great afternoon. I'll send you a follow-up email, but until the next webinar, if you're joining us, take care. Bye-bye.